So internal balance. On one end of the scale is when you feel really high, really excited, and really positive, and it carries you away. On the other end of the scale, you are in the dark side of the soul. There may be disillusionment, there may be depression, there may be despair, and it's a big continuum all the way from the deepest dark to the brightest light. And internal balancing does not mean that you chop off the bottom and the top of the scale and you stay somewhere in the middle. That is something that happens to people with mental health problems who receive psychotropic drugs because their high is unmanageable and their low is also unmanageable. So the medication just chops off the top and the bottom and leaves you somewhere in the middle, which is supposed to be a better place. And that's okay, but here we want to do something a little different. Internal balancing for me is connected with being able to span that bridge between the highest of the high and the lowest of the low, because then we have the full spectrum of what it means to be human. But what makes it difficult for people to handle the lows, basically? Nobody really minds the highs, but they definitely mind the lows. And what meditation practice gives us is an inner power to be able to stay in our state of internal balance even while we are experiencing the highest of the high and the lowest of the low, because internal balance is a connection to what we might want to call the ground of being, or the essence of what it is to be a soul. And the soul is the point of life, the point of light that I am. And the characteristics of the soul in power is purity, peace, silence, stillness, love, inner power, and bliss. And this is the balanced state, but it's not halfway in between the high and the low. It's another dimension. And so when we're looking at internal balancing, we're not really looking at something like a seesaw with two sides. We're looking at a balancing that's much more complex than that. The ground of being, or the state of inner equilibrium, is on a different plane. The highs and the lows are connected with our human experience. And as many people have mentioned, we are a spiritual being having a human experience in the human world. And the nature of the human world is variations between the highest of the high and the lowest of the low. And when you go to the cinema, you watch movies, the cinema, the film will carry you through the spectrum of emotions, through different images and stories. And so you experience them vicariously, but also in the reality of your life, in your relationships, in the workplace, in the community, watching the news, whatever. Your experiences take you to highs and lows, and sometimes it becomes too much and you cannot handle it. So what we're talking about in this session today is what you need and what you do and how you do to manage to handle the extremes of experiences, of emotions, so that you can be a full spectrum human being, but at the same time you always remain in your essential self. You always are the soul in power. Whether your experience is the highest of the high or the lowest of the low, it doesn't put you down into the abyss. And this is really why people don't like the lows. But the mechanism of consciousness and the nature of how we experience our human existence in our minds and through our sense perceptions and in our hearts is that whatever high you experience, you will also have a corresponding low. And there are many people who say, well, we want to have fun, we want to have a high, we want to enjoy, but we don't want to have the other side of things. And when they say that, it's because they do not understand the laws of spirituality. The laws of spirituality are fascinating, deep, and wonderful. And there are many of them. But the one that we're going to look at specifically in this session is that the nature of karma, you know the word karma, the nature of karma is to bring everything back to balance. And so that means that if you're going to have a big high, then that will have to be balanced by a deep low. And the problem for many people is while you enjoy the highs and you can appreciate them, sometimes it gets out of hand, but you don't really mind about it because you like the high. But the difficulty is that it will be met by an equal and opposite low, which you definitely have a hard time handling and which, generally speaking, people really don't like. So this practice that we are talking about here in this session is the practice of, in a way you can imagine it like someone with very, very long arms. So one arm can go to the highest of the high, the other arm can go to the lowest of the low, but where you are, the body that has the two arms remains always in the stage of equilibrium in the middle. And of course, in between your two arms, what do you find is your heart. And your heart is where you say you feel all your feelings. And the heart is also another word for the core of your being, which is the soul. And the soul is that extraordinary unit of consciousness that feels. And what you feel is what happens to you in response to perceptions. And in fact, the laws of spirituality also tell us that everything that we perceive that appears to be in the material world, all the events and people and situations and things and places, we experience all these in the mind. Because the soul experiences what takes place on the outside of the body. Our impression is that we experience the material world in the material world, but actually the location of experience is in the mind. And this is why we have this expression, it's all in the mind, but then people don't really know the extent that it is all in the mind. But what that means is that we have power over handling our experiences. But people don't have power. This is the issue. Not having power means not being able to handle the experiences. And meditation is about acquiring or reacquiring the power to handle the full spectrum of experiences without being dominated or influenced by those experiences. So there are two key influences for a serious meditator. And one is the influence of myself. I am the one who influences me. And the second one is the influence of the Supreme Being, the higher power, God, the force, the source, the intelligence of the universe. And then there are other influences which usually influence us, the influence of circumstances, and we can also call that appearances, because we experience the circumstances, the people, the things, the places, through our eyes and ears and our sense perception, our skin. But all of that is actually registered in the mind, and this is why we call it the appearances. The self is not particularly apparent. The self is very subtle, a tiny point of invisible, indiscernible light, but the self can be understood, comprehended. And then God, the Supreme Being, absolutely impossible to discern, to perceive through physical means, because neither the self is physical nor the Supreme Being is physical, but the appearances are physical. So in order to establish this kind of inner balancing, which is stable and steady, we need to really be aware and stay aware that all these performances that are going on in the material world need to be considered as appearances. Rather like how we relate to the cinema or the television. These are digital images that we engage with and that elicit emotions. And we enjoy those emotions, and we let ourselves go to horror movies and war movies and comedies and romances and all the different genres that there are, because we want to feel those feelings, but because we're not strong and we are weak spiritually, if that would happen in what we call reality, we wouldn't be able to handle it. And so we can handle it when it's on screen. And the soul needs to go to the highs and the lows. But if you can't handle it, then you have to have these tops and bottoms of experience chopped, and you remain like a kind of lobotomized patient. And who wants to live like that? So we want to live the full spectrum, but we have a problem with that. So what happens in meditation is the power in the soul gets restored. But another thing also happens, and that is that we have internalized a lot of things that we are not able to handle, and it takes the form of locked, blocked emotional pain, which is stuck deep down somewhere in the subconscious, and which drives our behavior and makes us fake, artificial, inauthentic, which makes us operate in a way that is in opposition to who we really are. And then in this state of being fake and not real and out of touch with ourselves, and then we get hurled into these big highs and lows which we cannot handle, and then it creates a lot of confusion and distress. So this is the practical reality that we want to look at here. And we're going to do a few minutes of a meditation practice to just show you how you can orient yourself internally in a balanced state while all of this is going on externally. So let's just take a moment to become quiet and to turn the attention within. When the mind is focused inside, you become more aware of the self as a point of light. You can see and hear the external world, but your attention is focused within. You go to the core of your being, the heart, the soul, the light. From this inner positioning, you create a distance between yourself and your sense organs, your sense perception. Practice. I am alone on the inside of this body. I am on a different plane. I am the pure, peaceful, powerful, loving and blissful being of light. And I experience the material world through my eyes, ears, skin, sense of smell, and even through the mind. I can experience atmosphere, the vibrations. I am connected to the material world through my body. And whatever is going on outside me, I register within, in the mind. And it goes deep into my soul. All these experiences are memories. There are some memories that are traumatic. Looked with fear, alarm, anger, distress. We react. It gets out of control and it goes in as emotional pain, unresolved, sitting deep within, in sometimes a monstrous form, and it drives who I am and takes me away from who I am. Sitting in the place of the soul, deep within, I practice being who I am. And I invoke those locked and blocked feelings to come up so I can look at them as they are. Meditation does two things. One, I hold myself to who I am. And secondly, I invoke the old memories of pain, distress, feeling low, so that I can practice to handle it. Handle it means I feel feelings of self-doubt and it's okay. The feeling doesn't drop me into a deep negative state, but I feel self-doubt. I let it be what it is. It moves through me and it disappears because the reality is it's only a feeling, an old feeling from way back, which sometimes clouds my spirit and makes me think I doubt myself even now. But looking at how I feel now, I feel good. I feel sure. I know who I am. I am who I am. Self-doubt is an illusion, and I don't consider it real. I don't let it take me down. I stay in the height of who I am, and it fades away. So this is an example of how to work with a negative feeling when it comes up. And generally speaking, these negative feelings will not come up in meditation. It will very often come up in long meditations. If you do for several hours, it will really eventually bring it up. Or sometimes it will come up sort of unexpectedly. You will say to yourself, okay, now I'll have a meditation, and instead of a meditation you have some sort of inner drama which is all negative, and then you think you're having a bad meditation and you may struggle with it for a while. Sometimes this will happen in the very early morning meditation, if you have that practice of very early morning meditation, because in the very, very early morning when you just wake up, you're actually closely connected with your subconscious. And all these lows, because we couldn't handle the lows, they get locked in the subconscious and they operate as what we may call vices or negative emotions, and they keep us away from who we are. So to invoke these things through meditation is to have a look at them from a more empowered place, from a more neutral place, and realize that they are old stuff, old locked emotions which really don't belong in your soul, in your heart, in your being, and this is the time when they can be dissipated and float away because they're really not real, in the sense of that's not who you are. That's something that happened that you couldn't handle, and so it got locked in. And we don't need that, because it drives behavior. It makes us fake, makes us artificial, makes us not true to ourselves. So we don't want that. Why would you want that? And so, as you let it pass away, you return back to your power. Because the presence of these things and the fact of not being able to handle them puts us in a mentality of not being in our power. And then you can't really function as you want to. So this process of meditation is a process of bringing us back to being in our power and being in that balance, so that when any time anything comes along, or even any ancient memory comes up, and your arm may go up to the positive, or your other arm may go down to the negative, but you handle that emotion. You don't try to stop it or cut it off or deny it. If you're feeling distressed, it's very good to acknowledge, yes, I'm feeling distressed. The situation where I am distressed brought back old bad memories of a distressing situation that I couldn't handle from the past, and I don't know why this is coming up, but really we do know why it's coming up. It's coming up because this replication of similar situations is an opportunity to handle the negative feeling. So handling it means it is happening, but it's not happening to me, or it is happening and it doesn't mean that I am not okay. I can manage this feeling that was provoked by this situation and bring myself to my equilibrium easily, naturally, and I can allow the hot flame of this negative feeling, I can let it just pass through me without disturbing me, without prompting me to react to it, without prompting me to do an action that I would otherwise regret later. And all of us have, like we call it, buttons, and when people know our buttons and they press their buttons, it's reminding me of a scene in the film called Back to the Future, where the hero was always provoked when somebody called him a coward or yellow. And whenever this statement was given, he immediately engaged and got into a confrontation and got himself into trouble because he wasn't able to handle, he wasn't able to neutralize that expression, because it came from some childhood trauma which was still there, and even in that film sequence it showed it in multiple lifetimes. And so all of us have these buttons, these areas where we can be triggered and we don't have control over it. And this is a sign of not being in your power. So we need to know what our buttons are, because if the other people know and we don't know, then we are like victims, and other people can play us however they want. And why would we go for that? That doesn't seem good for our dignity or our self-respect. But I must understand what my buttons are. My buttons are where there is emotional trauma that is locked, and I get thrown off balance as soon as that button is pressed. So we need practice. And this is why sometimes we get the experience that we are surrounded by people who really know how to press our buttons, and they succeed every time, and it makes us feel really irritated and frustrated because we're not able to take control of it. But we need to take control of it. How do we take control of it? Is first of all, we have to look at ourselves very carefully and observe our behavior through the day, through the month, through the years, and just really see what exactly it is that sets us off, and say to ourselves, okay, this is a button that I am handling with my ego, and that is ineffective. As soon as my button is pressed, other people can see it, I can't see it. That's a sign of ego. I can't see it, the other people can. They press the button, they play me like some sort of a toy, and I am powerless to neutralize their act of pressing the button. This is really to be disempowered. And meditation is all about getting that back, and especially asserting our position of the internally balanced being. So see what your buttons are. You have to really look at your own. The one I gave was an example. How does that work? You know, a man is supposed to be powerful, courageous, strong, a good fighter, wins, knows how to create money, knows how to control situations, and knows how to face challenges. But it can be that in childhood, when one is small and vulnerable and inexperienced, one became really afraid of some situation, and that fear got locked in. And whenever the person is provoked by this taunting, oh, this is just a coward, and then immediately come the reactions. So what does it look like when you're in that situation, or whichever is your personal situation? You immediately not go into reaction, but rather than that, you go into proactive. Proactive means I know I am in my power. And that statement isn't provoking the damaged, traumatized, disempowered self, but is being met by the balanced, inner, powerful self, who immediately asserts, I am the victorious one, I am the brave one, I will not engage in this provocative action. I let that feeling move through me like a flame. It will hurt, it will disturb, it will distress, but it will not take me over. I am in my power, and I have the ability to make this shift, that instead of that provocation pushing me down into a vulnerable, reactive state of being emotionally out of control, rather it takes me up, and I go into my power. I hold myself in my power. I see exactly what the situation is, what I need to do, and in terms of the inner feeling, I handle it. I see this is the difference. And the scene passes, and I stay in my seat of self-respect. I stay in my higher power, my higher consciousness. I see things for what they are, not in terms of what they want to give me the illusion of. I am not deluded. I remain free, independent, detached. And there is my stable state of inner balance. Now, these sorts of circumstances will be intensified when you meditate. What I mean by that is you may have a regular practice of meditation, morning, evening, through the day, whatever it is. You may sometimes practice to have longer periods of meditation, but what the meditation will do is almost like a conspiracy to attract towards you the things, people, and circumstances that press your buttons and that take you suddenly and unexpectedly by surprise into a state of weakness which corresponds to your locked subconscious emotion, and all hell breaks loose. So what do? You cover it up, you make yourself look good, you arrange your face and your body language to look like, oh, everything is fine, I'm not affected, I'm detached, but you're not. You're just holding yourself together as best as you can until you get a private moment where you can allow yourself to feel your feelings. But if you practice that for too long, you'll just stay inside your armor, and that deep locked emotion will get suppressed and repressed and pushed down, and you will become more and more artificial, more and more brittle, and sometimes you will not be able to control it, and you will overreact to a small provocation. And this is the sign that you're really ready to stop all that ego massage and really do the work to get free from this vulnerability, this, not vulnerability in the positive sense, but this vulnerability in the sense that you can be easily broken, and so you make yourself harder and harder and harder, but more brittle, so vulnerable in that brittle sense. Otherwise, to be vulnerable in the positive sense is to feel your emotions, to express your emotions, and the power of that provocation is moving through you, and you can feel your emotions. You maybe even allow yourself to break down, but you do not react and do something that is an avoidance of feeling the emotion. This kind of vulnerability is actually very positive and comes as you acquire the skill and agility to be able to feel your feelings and to express your feelings, but always in a way that is genuine and real, and the real you, and not a reactive, not against anyone, but just your being you, the real you, in your essence, in your truth, and you allow yourself to be seen by people because you are in your power, and you know that I am me, and this is me, and I'm influenced by me, and I'm influenced by God, and I'm a full spectrum person, and that is to be real and whole and complete.